Perfect. So, all right. Welcome, everybody. um, okay, so just before we start, I'm just gonna take few breaths just to get in the mood, in the vibe. You're welcome to join if you want to. You don't have to. Just a few deep breaths to relax and to leave behind everything else, and so we can try to connect to something deeper, try to channel what needs to be channeled, to be able to say some words that we need to hear, and to stay close to the truth as much as we can, to each connect to our own truth. Okay, we can gently open our eyes if we want to. We can keep the eyes closed. Here, Nathan Schomer is coming in. Perfect. Let me just say hi before I start. Well, it's too long. Okay, so the last time the last time that we got together and that we had a little discussion, it was around Pesach, Passover, and it's a very fundamental holiday in the Jewish tradition, and the next holiday that is coming up after Pesach is the Shavouot, and the time in between Pesach and Shavouot, which is the time that we are in right now, is a very special time in which we every day it's called the Omer. We have a count that separates us from Pesach to Shavuot. There is a count that we have to count every day, and it's called the Omer. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but this is the period of time that we are into right now. So what I wanted to do for this session was to discuss a little bit about this concept of Omer and what it is for, what it is about, and like what is the relationship between Pesach and Shavuot and the link between these two events. So that's kind of like the global idea that I came up with and that I wanted to discuss. Hey Nathan, how you doing? We just started. So you didn't miss much. Just few breaths. We just started. Just giving the backgrounds that I said that I want to talk a little bit about the Omer. And so this time I don't have many texts that I've prepared, so I'm not going to be able to share my screen with text, but it's going to be more flow discussion, hopefully. Okay. So when we read the Torah, we read the current period of time is described in the Torah in the book of Shemot, and when we read basically what seems to be a story. It could be metaphorical, it could be really happening in the physical world the way we know it. Maybe it really happened but in a different dimension. All of this doesn't really matter, but it's a story that we read. And as we read the story, we read the story of the people of Israel who is going through a lot of different phases. And from the reading of the Torah, from the story that we described, we learn some spiritual teaching that we are using today. And the way it works is that everything that is written in the Torah, everything that describe that story is analyzed and overanalyzed by sages, by commentaries, who commentators who have received with the Torah have received some keys that allow us to understand what is behind the message. Because when you read the Torah, if you just read the Torah itself, even if you understand the story, even if the story seems to make sense, the truth is it doesn't really make sense. And the sense that you're going to get from the story is most likely true, but only one little aspect of what this is really about. And thanks to the commentaries and the tradition that comes to us up until today, we have the keys to unlock, to unleash the deeper meaning that is behind that story. And so when we see the holidays today, when we try to understand how can we connect, because the big question is how today, in the body that we inhabit, in the time that we're living in, the space that we're living in, how can we relate to what's written in the Torah on one side, and on the other side, how can we relate to the holidays that are presented to us? Because the holidays that we are celebrating along the Jewish calendar around the year are all related to events from the Torah. And so they are the link to connecting back to the meaning of the Torah. And so when you understand the holiday, when you are practice the holiday, you always need to try to no, always need if you want to connect spiritually to the message that is behind the holiday, you have to understand what is that message, what does that mean, and you go back to the Torah to try to take meaning out of it. So for Pesach, for example, we see the description of the people of Israel getting out of Egypt. We saw the plagues, we see all of that, and we came to with the discussion, the conclusion, the idea that it represents in some level our own escape of Egypt that we need every year to escape from our own Egypt, and we need to understand what is Egypt, etc., etc., etc. So the same way that we did for Pesach, that we have the story, on one hand we have the story, and today we have the tradition that we gather all together, we eat matzot, we drink wine, we read the Haggadah, we do all of that. There is a little difference between the way we practice the holiday today and the way the holiday was practiced or described in the story back in the Torah. The difference is because what the sages are trying to have us do when we practice the holiday is to connect to the deeper meaning. So we don't need to actually physically go out of Egypt, kill an animal and eat it and put the blood on our doors again and again like they did in the past in order to connect to the deeper meaning. But what we need to do is to eat matzot, we need to eat maror, we need to say the Haggadah, so what appears is that the holiday is actually a practice that is giving us some exercises, some opportunities to get into a certain state, to get into a certain level of consciousness, perhaps. Now, the way right after Pesach, when we get out of Pesach, when we get out of Egypt, right? The first day out of Egypt, we have Pesach coming in the Torah. The way they describe it in the Torah, they do the Korban Pesach, they eat the Korban Pesach, and they go out of Egypt. They go out of Egypt, they get to the sea, and then they're gonna open the sea. All of that story that we talked about. They go through the sea. The Egyptians are drowning under the sea, and the direction from there is Mount Sinai. Because the goal of all of the getting out of Egypt is to receive the Torah, which is going to happen at Mount Sinai. No, in the Torah, the story is describing that in between the time they got out of Egypt and the time they received the Torah, there have been two months. So the getting out of Egypt was Nisan 15th, and then receiving the Torah was on the month of Sivan. In between Nisan and Sivan, you have the month of Iyar, which is the month that we are currently in the Hebrew calendar, and they receive it on the 6th of Sivan, meaning that there is about a month and a half, a little more than a month and a half between the time they get out of Egypt and the time they get to Sinai. The commentaries are asking, like, why do we have this time in between getting out of Egypt and the Torah and receiving the Torah? Why couldn't we have just like getting out of Egypt and right away getting to the Torah? Why did we need that time of a month and a half getting from Egypt out to Sinai? And that time is the time that we are currently in, the time of Iyar. And what they say is that this time is meant for us to get ready to receive the Torah. So the idea is that we are not ready. We cannot just receive the Torah. We have to get ready to receive it. And so the process that is happening, basically the spiritual steps that are described from Egypt to Torah, one way to see them is the following. In Egypt, we are slaved. We are slaved in a way that we don't even know that we are slaved. So it could be, if we want to bring it down to our current understanding or our current life, what it is to be a slave. A slave is somebody who is not in control of anything. He cannot control his time, he cannot control his space, he cannot control like what he does, what he thinks. There is nothing he can control. So being slave is being in a state that you don't have yourself. You cannot be yourself. You're 100% dependent on something else. Now, the worst that can happen is that if you're a slave, but you don't know that you're a slave, because then you have no way out. So that's Egypt. You're a slave and you don't know that you're a slave. Now, for us, it could be you're a slave to some emotions. It could be that you're a slave to, some pattern of thinking. It could be that you're a slave of somebody else. It doesn't matter. Everyone can find with himself what it means to be a slave. But the trick is we don't really know that we are slaves. So that's Egypt. You're a slave, you don't know that you're a slave. Then you have plagues or miracles. So something external is happening in your life and it starts to kind of like slowly wake you up. And you're like, whoa, what happened? Like, oh, what? So you're living your life, you're a slave, you don't know it, and then something happened and you start to question. You're like, what happened? And you start to taste something that is different than you always knew. If I take an example of like an emotional state, let's say that somebody is default mode of operation would be to get angry. Let's say he's triggered every time somebody tells something that he doesn't like. He gets angry. He's triggered, and he doesn't even notice that. He doesn't even know that about himself. It's just his way of functioning. And so all of his interactions, all of his life, everything, he always reacts that way. And then one day, for some reason, he gets up, somebody tells him something, and instead of getting triggered, he just answers in a way that is kind of like calm. And it could be like, whoa, it could be, if you think about it, you'd be like, what just happened there? I just connected to that person differently. So you can come back to yourself or back home and you start to think like, what did happen different today? I feel different. You have to be, you will notice something. So you have to notice like what happened to you, and you start to understand that, okay, maybe anger is something, whatever. The example is not very well defined, but we can all see our own example. The point is, as we go about in our life, things are constantly going to happen that are opportunities for us to wake up. And they're going to keep coming back until we realize that there is that thing that we don't want anymore, that we've been a slave of for like a very long time, and that we don't want anymore, and then we want to get rid of. when we get to that point, that's the point of like the plagues of Egypt. There are 10 plagues, meaning that you have a numbers of occurrences to help you get out from a state of slavery to a state of awareness that you're a slave, awareness that you want to get out. You still cannot really get out. You're still a slave, but at least you know it. At least you know you want to get out. So you grow that way until one day, somehow, with work, with like other things, you get out. You free yourself. That's getting out of Egypt. And from there, let's say, you're at zero. Is this is kind of like yourself? You were way below, and then you come back to zero. Now the Torah Shavuot is right up there, and so you need, after you get free of whatever you get free, you need to bring yourself, you need to build yourself up. So that's the start. The start is getting out of your whatever enslaves you. The next step is receiving the Torah, and in between you need to get ready. And so in 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 Egypt, like we say that we were below 49 degrees, what we call, whatever the detail, but we call like 49 degrees of impurity. And the number 49 is not a random number. And what separates us to then the next level, from minus 49, we went up to zero, that was getting out of Egypt. And then from zero, now we need to get to plus 49. In between Pesach and Shavuot, we count, there is 50 days. So starting the second days of Pesach, it is written in the Torah that we need to start to count the Omer. The Omer it's 49, and the 50th day is Shavuot. So we call them sometimes the 49 gate. We have 49 gates, 49 doors to open to prepare ourselves to get ready to receive the Torah. Now, before I get into that, the number 49 and 50 are not random numbers. In the Torah, in Judaism, there are a lot of like numbers that are key, but the number 7 is a very key number. The world was created in 6 days, and then the 7th days was Shabbat. Now they come hand in hand. The day of creation, the day of the week, they come with the day of Shabbat, and they complete each other. They are two sides of the same thing. But whatever happened with the sign of 7 means nature. So Shabbat is in some ways the spirit that is within nature, but it's still part of nature. To get beyond that, when we go beyond the 7, we talk about number 8, because it's just 7 plus 1. Whenever the number 8 come into the picture, we're talking about something that is supernatural, that is beyond whatever we can experience in nature. Because Shabbat, even though Shabbat is kind of everything is kind of supernatural, right? The days, the creation, all of that, it's hard. But even though Shabbat is kind of like beyond its very spiritual day, it is still within nature. When you go to number 8, it's beyond nature. No, 49 is 7 times 7. So basically what happened is that we have cycles of 7. So it's like we have 7 weeks. So the same way that we had 7 days each week, here we have 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot. So there is this idea of the 7 times 7. And Shavuot is plus 1. It's 50. So 50, it's the same concept as the 8. It's 7 plus 1, or 7 times 7 plus 1. You get into that space that is beyond the natural, that is beyond, I don't want even to say beyond space and time, because it's like, space and time has another aspect of it. I'll talk about it in a minute, but it's something that is even beyond that. So that's the idea of the one of the idea of the 50 days. Which, by the way, that's why we do the Brit Milah on the 8th days, because it's something supernatural. So every time you're going to see the 8 coming in, it's something supernatural. The Yovel and this idea of things repeating themselves, like the Yovel, it's like the after 50 years, everything goes back to zero and you don't have property anymore. This is these ideas of cycles, like everything is like a cycle, a cycle, a cycle. You can get even bigger, like, we talk about the in the calendar, in the Hebrew calendar, where it's the year 5781. So we're gonna have 6 millenniums before we get to the era of the Shabbat, the millennial Shabbat. So we're gonna have a 7th millennium that's gonna be the Shabbat, and then we're gonna get to the 8th that is gonna be the supernatural. So everything has these cycles that you see all the time. So Shavuot, the Torah that we receive, is the number 50, supernatural. Now, the question is, how do we get there? Because, okay, we got out of Egypt. If I go back to the story, we got out of Egypt, and then we want to get to the level that we can access like the supernatural. That we have that portal that is open that we can access. And for that, we need to cross the 49 gates. So one of the way that is given us to do that is through what we call the Sefirot. And without getting into too much details about the Sefirot are kind of like portal of energies, if you will, that are basically a gate that connects you from the infinite energy, the oneness. When the oneness and the infinite energy comes and to our world, it goes through a portal of energy that is called a sephira. There are 10 sephirot, and 7 of them are sephirot that we can access. There are sephirot that we can work on with our body, with our emotional body, with our physical body. And these are the 7 sephirot that we can access, are the way that we will be able to grow to the place that we can receive the Torah. And each day of the Omer, there is a combination of this 7 portal of energy that we can meditate on, that we can work on to refine a part of ourselves. And each day, so the combination of the 7 together, you're going to have 49. And each day, we're going to work using a certain type of energy to refine ourselves. So, I know it's a little, if you're not familiar with the Sefirot, it might be a little abstract, but I'm going to try to make it a little more concrete. The idea is that when we free ourselves from a certain type of behavior or a certain type of emotion, etc., as we grow and as we go, our relationship to whatever we free ourselves from is going to be very complex. At the beginning, you're going to have days that you're going to regret what you just left. Maybe you got to an awareness. If I talk about anger, it's a trivial example, but I will keep on that. You got your awareness, you think you free yourself from anger, but then you're going to grow, and then you're going to be facing a situation that you're going to be like, oh, I wish I could get angry now, because that's my way of operating. That I feel more comfortable. I got free of it. I understand that I should not use that and all of that, but now I feel I'm lacking a mean of existence. I'm lacking a mean of like dealing with my problems. And you're going to have a certain type of relationship with everything that you're going to leave off. It's going to take time. And that relationship that you have with whatever you left this measurement is, I think, the measurement of the 50 gates. The 50 gates to get to a place that you're totally free, more than free. You're way beyond whatever you left. So you need to work. Being free of something mean that you're gonna go through a whole period of time that you're gonna have a lot of different emotional and actual things that are going to be triggered within you because of the lack of whatever you left. And when you analyze, when you have to scrutinize and look at yourself, look at how you react, look at how you feel about all of the little triggers that are going to come, and you have to work on each of them up until you're totally beyond it. And then it's not even a question. Like whatever happened to your life, this old you, the old thing that you left, is not even coming back into your heart, into your mind, into your thoughts. It's like that's it. You're changed. You're totally evolved. When you're there, you're finally open to interact with the world and to interact with others in as if you were totally a new person. And that's in some ways that's one aspect of receiving the Torah. Why? Because the Torah in that idea is the pure essence of your true self or of everything. And in order to be able to connect to the true essence of everything, including yourself, you need to get rid of everything else that is not your true essence. And that's a constant work that we are doing over generation and generation and generation. Because it's not only in our lifetime that we are doing that. It's throughout all the lifetime. The idea that we need to connect, the Torah is given, it's an event that is beyond space and time. We have the space and time realm, and then you have a realm that is beyond space and time. We don't need to really fully understand it or fully comprehend it, but just for the sake of the idea, there is a realm, there is a space of consciousness that is beyond space and time. When you're beyond space and time, everything happens, everything had happened, everything that will happen, everything. It's like an axis, if you want, of everything happening. And then you get to the space and time. You're still connected there, but you're experiencing whatever is beyond space and time in the consciousness of space and time. Meaning, I'll give an example because I know it could be very abstract. Let's say that let's talk about emotions. When you feel, for example, a deep sense of love, you fall in love with someone, or you feel joy, or you feel, let's say, sadness. I think we all experience that at some point. And when you're really fully with your emotions, you feel as if you were always feeling that way. I don't know if that ever happened to you, that you fall in love with someone, you're like, what? It's like, I knew you. I always knew you. We're always together. We're always together. It's like you don't really understand what's going on. You lose the track of time. There is no time. You're just into the feeling of love. It is timeless. For a moment, you're touching something that is timeless. Now, every time you're going to feel that sensation of love, of timeless love, or joy, or anger, or whatever it is that is the full emotion that you lose track of time, you could say that you're going back to the same emotion that has manifested through space and time. So you're experiencing it today, and then tomorrow, and then in 2 years from now, but you're going back to the same thing that is beyond space and time. So you could say that the emotion is existing outside of the realm of space and time, but the way you experience it within the consciousness of space and time is in different spaces and in different times. But the emotion is there, always, right? The love is there. The way that you're going to feel it in a year, 2 years, throughout your life, you're always going to feel the same thing that is always there. We could think of it that way. So the Torah, you could think of it that way, that the event of giving the Torah is always happening. It is currently happening. As it's happening and it goes down to the space and time, you have different people, like you have a cycle, different generation, different bodies, different people who are always connecting back to that event of getting the Torah. So throughout generation, throughout our life, every year, as we're going out of Egypt and we're going back to celebrating Shavouot and counting in between, we are basically trying to get ready to remove everything within the consciousness of space and time that separate us from connecting to that event that is beyond space and time. So what we need to be working on in our current life is to find ways to access what's within us that doesn't change. That whatever that is within us that is eternal. And to do that, we need to get ourselves into a state of consciousness that we can detach from the things that are changing, from the things that are evolving. One of them is the body, for example, or our experience of so all of the program that we have, that we get free from slavery, that we need to it's a training program so we can learn to see beyond ourselves, or what we call ourselves in a certain state of consciousness, beyond our bodies, beyond our emotion, beyond our trigger, beyond our psychology. You go back, you always try to go back and to go beyond, to go deeper, to go more in touch with your essence. Because your essence, this doesn't change. Your essence has different forms throughout space and time, different bodies, different people, but your essence is there. And all of our essence collectively, call it souls, call it, are present, receiving the Torah in Sinai right now and tomorrow and every time. But us, this consciousness that is spreading through space and time and go around is getting slowly disconnected from that event. And we forget our essence, and we get caught up into our day-to-day life. We get caught up into our role, into our pain, into our emotion, into our psychology, into whatever we do. We get so caught up that we forget. But in the old system of Jewish holidays that is circular, that is going around like all the time, like we do things and we go back every year after year, generation after generation. That's all we do. Why we do all of that? Because in that circular movement, we are transcending when we do it, when we connect. It's not like it's easy to say, it's a good goal to have, it's really hard to achieve, but that's what we're trying to do. We are turning around, we are circling something, an event, and because we need to remember to reconnect. That's our way to reconnect to that event. That is transcendental. That's the definition of like the Torah is transcendental, meaning that it goes way beyond the space and time. It's like a portal that has opened beyond everything that we can understand, and then we lose track. But we were all there. We're all connected to that, and so that's what we need to work on in between Pesach and Shavuot, year after year, to find, and each in his own way, and each, there are techniques and there are ways to work on, but it's a very personal work that we need to do, and it starts in very, very basic stuff. And one thing that I love, because so far it could be a little abstract, so let me bring it down to something more concrete. When one of the biggest sages in the Talmud, Hillel, was asked once if he could sum up the Torah in one sentence, and the other person that was like the counterpart of Hillel was Shammai, the two biggest sages at that time, was also asked the same question. Shammai was more kind of like a nervous, not nervous, but he was more. He had a different way of seeing life, and he was more strict in many ways. The person comes to his door and like, can you sum up the Torah in like one sentence? And he's like, get out. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want. There is nothing I can tell you. And so he's like, okay, because for him it's like you have to study, you have to do. It's like it's a huge thing. He goes to Hillel, and Hillel says, sure, here, don't do to somebody else what you wouldn't like to be done to you. And he's like, and the rest is just explanation. So it's a beautiful. When we talk about the Torah and everything, it's okay what it is. Here we have one way that we can understand it. Don't do to somebody else what you wish to not have done to you, and the rest is just explanation. So if this is the Torah, like a way to relate. Of course, it's way more than that, but that's just one way to approach it. Receiving the Torah is, with that angle, is understanding or how to relate to somebody else, how to really relate to somebody else. And that's something that is really hard to do, but that we can all try to do. Because and I think it will make sense. Most of the time, when you are still within your own self, when you're still caught up with your own psychology, your emotion, and your triggers, and da da da, it's hard to see somebody else. When you see someone else, you see your projections onto somebody else. You see how that other person triggers you. You see how the other person, whatever you see is not the other person, is you. You see you reflected by the other. And sometimes you can be so blind that you don't even realize that you think you're talking to somebody else, but you're actually talking only to yourself. Whenever you're on that state, you cannot have really relationships. All the relationships you have are going to be relationship with yourself. Somebody within that state will never get out of himself. And so, in order to be able to meet somebody, slash to receive the Torah, to be able to understand what somebody else is, so you won't do to somebody else what you don't like to be done to you, you need to refine yourself first. You need to stop being so self-centered, so self-caught into your own misery, into your own thoughts, into your own emotions, into your own fantasies, into your own projection. And so receiving the Torah, many times it is compared to a marriage between a man and a woman. And I think that we can find that idea also there. Because if you want to really marry somebody, you have to be able to see the person. If you don't see the person, you're never going to be able to be with that person. And so one way that we can work on getting to on getting ready to get the Torah is to work on ourselves to be able to really see others, and so to learn to understand ourselves, to refine ourselves in all the way possible, and to make sure to always be careful to be able to like see others for who they are and not for who we wish they were, who we thought they should be, who we want them to become. Just see a person for who they are at that moment. If we train ourselves to do that, I think we're on a good path to be able to get really open to others, to the world, and on a good path to receive the Torah. And then from there, we'll be able to build upon that and get to higher levels of consciousness, and then get to all that stuff that I've talked about getting outside of space and time, all of that. But first, we should start with the very basics of like trying to be able to see somebody else. So that's the idea of the time between Pesach and Shavuot. These 49 days that are separating us is to work through the natural aspect of ourselves it's a very kind of like emotional, psychological work and like day-to-day work, but that's the work that we need to do. And what I mentioned, the Sefirot, we can look at it a little bit later. I'm not going to extend on that right now, but these are tools that are proposed to us so we can, it's like a template that we can work with to to get some energy or to get some connection or some realization of who we are or how do we act in certain aspects of life through our emotions, through the way we come off with other people, etc., etc. And every day has a different like combination of sephira, which is a different uh, character trait that we can work on, or a different type of emotion that we can work on, and that could be an interesting way to work. If we don't have access to the sephirot, if we don't really know what it is, we can just like basically look at ourselves honestly as we can, meditate on things that we like, don't like, that we miss about our old self, that we wish that we wouldn't have anymore, etc., etc. So that's the idea of the Omer. That's the idea of the time separating us. That's why the people of Israel in the account of the Torah, when I started to say that, they didn't come out of Egypt and right away got to the Torah because they were not able to. Because when you get out of slavery, you need to go through a lot of steps and you need to work a lot to get yourself ready to be able to open up to receiving the Torah. So that's kind of like what I wanted to discuss. That's it. We can open up to discussion, feedback, questions, whatever,
Really
other
beautiful,
things.
Matt.
Thank you.
Well done.
You are you working on the Sephirot during the Omer?
Yes, I'm trying to.
So what do you do?
Um, so every day when you count the Omer, every day if you take a regular calendar or just a regular book, they will tell you the combination of the Sephirot. So the Sephirot, there are 10 Sephirot, and the first three are more kind of like mental Sephirot, and so it's Keter, Chokhmah, Bina, and then you have seven that are more kind of like the body, emotional Sephirot: Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut. And so in the Chesed, you have like number Chesed, you have the Chesed Sheba Chesed, the Gvura Sheba Chesed, the Tiferet Sheba Chesed. A combination of each of them. So each day it's a combination of two of them. So the first week is under the Chesed. Chesed is like the attribute to give. The it's also the masculine energy. The second week is under the attribute of Gevura, which is the limitation, the limits, or what defines space. It's kind of more like a feminine energy. The third week is under Tiferet. We are currently in the fourth week, which is under Netzach. Netzach is the way you present yourself to others, on the way you are going to. Um, it's kind of like a giving energy. It's like from inside to outside, but in how do you relate to others and how do you present to others and how you give to others. And every day under the week of Netzach, of this thing, you have one of the other seven. So every day I go, for example, like this today is going to be the Netzach of Netzach. And so I'm trying to read a little bit about what it means and trying to do a 5-10 minutes meditation with that concept. It's not always easy to do because there are concepts that are very difficult to grasp. We also map the Sephirot to the body. So sometimes I'm just meditate on my body. If I cannot understand it, I'm just trying to connect to the part. Like the Chesed is the right arm. There are different ways, but like the way I follow, Chesed is the right arm, Gevurah is the left arm. So I'm meditating on my hands. The Tiferet is the solar plexus. Netzach is the right leg. Hod is the left leg. Yesod is the reproductive system, and the Malchut is the mouse system, kind of like the chakra system. So when I don't understand them, I meditate on my body. I'm trying to hope that some understanding will come. Sometimes it doesn't, to be honest, but And so because it's a combination of two, you can do cool stuff. Like today is like right arm and left leg, you know. So you can think of maybe movements of or your right arm and your left leg, or just try to bring your consciousness or awareness, kind of like you do your own yoga type of movement, if you will. Uh,
Nice. That's totally spot on. I love that. I
that's
love it.
cool. That's cool. That's when
That's
you
amazing.
don't, you know, because it's really hard to understand.
No, I'm doing the same thing. I'm going
Oh
through the
yeah,
thing. This is the first time in my
Ama-
life that I've been doing it. It's amazing. But
amazing.
the body thing is, I love it.
It's
It's
cool.
great.
It's
Yeah,
cool.
because it is connected.
It is. It is. So if you read, there is something called Patach Eliyahu. When you know, if you do that, you do that. So Patach Eliyahu, he describes the
The
Sefirot,
beginning of the figure.
and
Yeah,
and he bring them to the part of the body. That's where I learned them from.
yeah.
And so it's cool. And then you can, if you want to go another level, you could say there is a text that we do in the prayer every day that's called Ashrei Yoshveh. It's a very famous text that we do in the prayers. And some books are mapping some of the sentences of the text with some sefirot. So you could do, yeah. So you could do. Sometimes I do a mantra meditation type of thing. So I'm taking the sentence from that text that is connected to a certain sephira, and I repeat it, focusing on the body part. So you add the mantra to it. So that's another way to do it. You know, if it's more kind of like an embodiment of that message. That's when you
Yeah.
don't understand. You try to embody it. I do. Yeah.
I have a request. Can you send me a copy of that Ashrei Yoshvei? I've never even heard of that before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah. 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 For sure.
Makes sense.
So yeah. So that's a way. But if you don't have all the Sephirot thing, just you know, like this. For me, I can, like every year I'm work. Not every year. It's not that linear. You know, I'm presenting as it's like linear. It just comes. Sometimes there are something that I'm realizing that I want to work on, that I'm not happy with. Something that is holding me back, something that I know I need to remove, or something that I know I need to add because I don't feel connected to myself, or I know that I'm less patient with others. With you know, your relationship with others, especially when you're with your family and stuff, it's a really good indication to what are the triggers that you still need to work on. You know, because family can trigger you in beautiful ways. So it's a good way, it's a good way to learn, to practice. So you see like, oh, okay, I'm still, oh, I thought I was very patient, but with my mom I'm not that patient. So okay, I need to work a little more on my on my patience, you know. Or with my
That's why you
husband.
chose to be with your parents for the Omer.
Yeah, exactly. I saw why, but it's a good it's a good reflective tool, you know. Or your partner, or, you know, people around you. You just check what. It's monitoring, constant monitoring, you know. Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
So, last, so for Pesach, it's really about like getting out of slavery, obviously, and then there's this get ready phase, and then you actually